how to convert your Meister R or BC Racing coilovers to a suspension. All you're going to need is this, and we bought this off AliExpress for just £50. Welcome back to another Kane Builds video. So, as the title and thumbnail suggests, today we are showing you how to convert your Meister R or BC Racing coilovers to a suspension. It is super cheap, super easy, so make sure you stay tuned to see how we get it done. So for those of you who are new to the channel, this is a set of S2000 Meister R coilovers, and we are custom fitting these to our Honda Acti, which we are also putting a motorbike engine. If you want to see that whole project, make sure to go and subscribe so you can check out our other videos and see what we've been getting up to. So as you can see, this is the standard suspension, normal cup on the bottom, normal top mount, and the spring. We also have all the adjusting collars so we can adjust the height. But in order to convert your coilover to a suspension, all you're going to need is this. So this is a double bellow bag. It's a universal bag to fit over your coilovers. This is by Amex. They are becoming a bit of a bigger company, and we bought this off AliExpress for just £50. So that means you can convert all your coilovers from coilovers to bags for less than 250 quid with delivery usually. Amex are becoming a bit of a bigger company, so the prices I imagine will start to go up eventually, but for the time being, these are super cheap. This is the exact setup that I have on my MX-5, and it's the exact setup that also fits on these S2000 coilovers. Obviously, we haven't checked every coilover, but taking measurement, it seems that Meister R and BC Racing use the same dimensions in order to get these to fit. There's a few simple dimensions you need. It's the thread size, the hole in which the O-rings on the inside fit, and the hole for the top of the bag. But without further ado, let me start to dismantle this shock. It takes probably less than 10-15 minutes to convert each one. I'll show you some of the things to check for and make sure that you've got it all set up correctly. So let's convert this coilover into an A-strut. First thing we've got to do is remove all of the top mount. First things first, remove all of the fittings on the top of the shock, like the top nut and the dampener. We can then take the top mount off and slide off the spring from the shock. Make sure to remove any of the inside rubbers and bump stops as well. That is all of the pieces that we need to remove. So essentially we now have a base shock. A lot of these shocks are made up the same, but then all they do is change the bottom cup. They'll change the spring to have different spring rates and lengths, and then they'll often change the top mount to obviously suit different cars. So all we have to do now is basically screw this onto the shock and add top mount. But before we do that, let me just show you some of the dimensions and some of the things you need to check on yours before you order these. I'll put a link in the description for these where you can buy these exact ones. But if you take some dimensions on your shocks, you could ask the company on the AliExpress. There's loads of different options for bags for different sizes. So I'll show you some of the things to look out for when converting these. So let's go to the whiteboard and I'll show you. So I'll try and explain this as best as possible. It's not drawn to scale and it's very exaggerated just to show you what's going on. So the red drawing is the A suspension. So what you have is the hole in the top, which is this hole here. And as you can see on the drawing, there is actually an indent. And if we take a look on the inside of the bag, right where the bottom where the hole is, there is actually a little shoulder. And this is essentially where we're going to put an O-ring on these wider bits here to make a seal at the top of the bag. So on the bottom of the bag, we have two different width shoulders. So we have here, which is the threaded section, and then slightly further inside the bag, there is actually a narrower shoulder. So taking a look in there, as you can see, the threads are that thick, and then the lower section there is actually a shoulder which gets narrower. On the narrower section we also have these two circles here. These represent the two O-rings which you might be able to just see inside the hole there. And taking a look at the shock, you can see right at the top there's a threaded section. It gets narrower and there is actually a little shoulder here, and that is this little section where there's a little bit of a split pin. You can remove this, but we do leave this on there for the install and we'll show you why later. But there is actually a shoulder, and that is essentially what's going to hold the washer, which then will create a seal between the O-ring which sits there and the O-ring which is going to hit the washer. Moving on to the bottom of the shock, the center silver piece here comes down, and there's actually again two sections on the bottom of the shock. The threaded bar which comes all the way up the side, and it actually steps in a touch to a nice smooth section. And as you can see here, you've got the threaded section, and it does drop down ever so slightly to this smooth section. The smooth section there is essentially where the O-rings are going to touch here and create a seal on the bottom of the bag. So all of the drawing will become more clear when we start to assemble it, and I'll explain even more then. But let me show you the actual dimensions you need to check on your shock before you order or have a look to see whether or not these fit. Like I said, there are multiple options. So let me show you the 3 main dimensions you have to check for you to then pick which bag will fit your car. So as I said, there are only 3 main options you can choose from. The first one is the top section there. That is an M12 hole on ours, and that is the size of the hole at the very top. Not this smooth section there, you need the size of the threaded hole, as that is the bit that is going to fit through that narrow section. The next important one is the width of the threads. So as you can see, take a measurement roughly where my finger is there and measure how wide the threads are. And that section there will basically be the width of the threads, and it will be the size of the hole on the inside of the bag. And the third and final dimension you need is the size of the smooth shoulder on the shock. So taking a look there where my finger is, you need to measure the width of that, so that determines the size of where the O-rings are going to sit on the inside of the shock. Once you've got all your dimensions, take a look on the link in the description, see what options you have. As I said, BC Racing and Meister tend to use the same dimensions, so the shocks in the description may help, but I can imagine that a lot bigger cars will have a bigger strut because it's a lot heavier, so you may have to go for the M14 top, and they may be like a 55mm thread, so go and check that out. But now let's start to assemble the shock, and I'll show you what everything that we've done so far means. So we had to remove the bump stop earlier on. I think you could leave the bump stop in if you're not planning on putting the car super low, but for us this may fully compress, so we don't want the bump stop in the middle. Take the washer that was on the top and simply slide that back, and that shoulder on the diagram, as I said, that means that that washer cannot go any further than it is there. So next thing we do then is take a simple O-ring, and we're going to slide it onto there all the way down to the washer. This isn't the perfect size, it is a little bit too small, but we have got some on order. But for the time being, we're just going to get this on, as it will create the seal. So we now have our 2 surfaces which are going to create the seal. The O-rings on the inside of the bag there are going to sit on this surface here, and then the shoulder that is on the inside of this section here is going to sit and hit the O-ring and create a nice seal on the inside. So all you have to do now is simply slide this on and then screw this onto the threads, and you have to screw it as far as you possibly can. Before you screw it on, ideally you want some assembly lube or some oil to go on the inside of the O-rings. You want to make sure you lubricate them, otherwise if you put them on we could end up damaging the O-rings if there's any dryness to this surface. So we need to make sure to get some oil on these O-rings first. The bag should thread on fairly nicely, it should go on quite smoothly. If there's any resistance, take it back off, maybe add a bit more oil, as obviously the rubbers will create a bit of friction. But you should basically tighten this up all the way, get it as tight as you can by hand, and then maybe give it a half turn. Either get someone else to hold the other end and tighten it up, or see what you can do. So that is the majority of the work now. All we have to do now is get the top mount back on, and then the strut is complete. Other than the dimensions, this is the only difficulty you may have converting your struts to air struts, is the top mounts. Fortunately, these S2000 ones are quite narrow, so that means that when we put them on the top, there is still enough thread for us to get a washer and a bolt onto the top. However, on my MX-5, the Meister R ones were a little bit thick. What you can do is have stuff machined off. Quite often there may be a little shoulder on the shock, which is probably a centimetre or so thick, which you might be able to get machined off nice and flat, which will give you a centimetre more space. But essentially you want to make sure that you can put the top mount back on, get a washer on if that's how your top mounts are mounting, and then get a nylock washer on the top. You can also get some shortened nylock washers. Nylock is obviously very good because the vibrations will end up making the top mount come loose, or you can maybe go with some Loctite. Once the top mount is on, the conversion is pretty much complete. We do have a couple of things we can do, safety things. So as you can see, we've got the collars on the bottoms. Ideally, if you're not going to use them, then remove them because they may end up catching, or you don't want them being in the way for any reason. But what we can do is use these collars and tighten them onto the bottom of the bag, and that just stops the bag spinning in any way. So if we tighten that collar right up against the bottom of the bag, tighten it up as much as possible, then that means that the bag is nice and secure as well, so they can come in handy. But that is it. It's a super simple conversion. There are some things you might have to take into account. Just keep an eye on this video, take extra care on what we've looked at. If there are any questions you have, then please ask in the comments. We will do our best to try and help you out. I have run this setup on my MX-5 for the last 3, maybe 4 years now. Converting to air suspension can be really expensive. Going to management, you could be spending over £1,000, £2,000 on management alone. Some cars as well, you may not have air suspension available for that. However, if BC Racing or Meister R or someone like that make a set of coilovers, that means that you can then hopefully convert your strut into air suspension struts. This may not be fully exclusive to BC Racing coilovers. If you have another set of coilovers that you might think it works, just take the measurement, see what you can do, get the thread pitch. All the information is on the link in the description for the bags, and then there's a really detailed chart and it'll show you all the dimensions you need, so make sure to go and check that out. But that is it for this video. We have got a lot of other projects on. We've got the K truck, which these are being fitted into. We're not using these top mounts, we're going to be using an eyelet on the top, so make sure to subscribe so you can see all of our other videos. We are putting a motorbike engine in the K truck too, so hopefully there's a lot of things coming up in the near future. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, hopefully we've helped you out and hopefully save you a bit of money, but we will catch you in the next one.